Hello and welcome back. And do you remember this bad boy? Last year during QuTS 2024 over in Taipei, QNAP showed off some brand new solutions, and one of them was this, the TS-h765eu, a new half-depth 4-bay rack mount solution. And in this video, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why this may well be the perfect rack mount NAS solution for you in your home or business environment. But I'm also going to give you 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence a bit longer or shop elsewhere. We're already in the middle of our depthy review of this device with performance and temperature and all that kind of stuff going on in the background. But in the meantime, all the things that we found out so far, everything we like and everything we don't, we're going to comprise into this video. So without further ado, let's crack on with number 1. That's right, I've already touched on this in the introduction, but this is a half-depth rack mount. I'd say right now, half-depth rack mounts at 30 to 40 centimeters are getting real trendy indeed. Rack mounts no longer have to be these big, hulking 19-inch depth monsters. They can be nice, simple 12 to 14-inch deep NAS solutions. This not only arriving with 4 hard drive storage bays, but also a plenty amount of expandability that we're going to talk about later on. Now, what that means in real terms is this tiny box here doesn't even need to be in a rack mount. It's so small, so slim at 1U, you could deploy this on a desktop if you chose to. Although, again, bear in mind, there is several fans on the back, so noise might be an issue for you. But with 4 bays of storage, and again, you can run this with a single drive if you choose, or fully populate utilizing the QNAP QuTS software, it allows you to scale up with modern 24, 26 TB drives, 100 TB like that, obviously factor in your RAID, however. But the point still remains that at this scale, this is a real small rack mount for a huge amount of storage potential. Now, this is one of the things last year that really stood out to me on this 1U NAS, and that is that unlike utilizing traditional PCIe slots, something we'll touch on later on, this has these 3 E1S upgrade slots there. Now, for those out of the loop, E1S is effectively a middle ground between traditional PCIe and M.2 NVMe. It ultimately means that this system can take advantage in its smaller scale of significantly more expandability. To put it into perspective, one of these tiny little slots here on the rear will allow you, if you want, to take advantage of M.2 NVMe's. M.2 NVMe's that can be loaded directly into these individual slots here for pseudo hot swapping there at the background. So with that, it means that you can choose if you want to use M.2 NVMe's, and because there's 3 of them, the result is that alongside utilizing 1 or 2 M.2 NVMe's inside each of those slots, you could, if you choose, opt for one of their 10 gig upgrade cards. That means that although on day 1 you'll be getting hold of one of these devices that has its default storage capabilities, you could choose 1 or 2 SSDs and add 10 GBE granularly and gradually throughout this system's lifetime in your home or business environment. That amount of flexibility is quite handy, and also it is a huge amount of expandability with 3 upgrade slots on a 1U NAS, something where normally on 1U devices you're lucky if you get even 1 PCIe slot. Next up, I want to talk about that CPU, the Intel 7405C, an Intel Atom 4-core 4-thread processor. Now, the reason it's significant here is that this system is part of the EU series of devices, that mnemonic there at the end of the model ID. Now, normally, QNAP devices that end in the EU prefix are pretty underwhelming in terms of their CPU. They generally either opt for a 64-bit ARM or a very low-end Intel Celeron processor there. This has bucked the trend with a very good file processing CPU there. It lacks integrated graphics, but it has a performance there all the way up to 3.4 gigahertz and just a 12-watt TDP. Released at the end of Q2 2024, it is quite a recent CPU at that, even when it was being demoed in May 2024 at QuTS. Now, that CPU, according to QNAP's own performance benchmarks, and I'm still waiting for my 10G adapters to test this myself, apparently can give 2 gig up and down easily with 2 10 gig connections on this device, obviously storage media permitting. Overall, that CPU on an EU series device from QNAP is actually a great deal higher than everything else in the portfolio right now within that class. This next point is more of a PSA, and it's more about this device and QuTS. If you are looking at a QNAP NAS now with QuTS, one of the biggest downfalls that system had was if you wanted to use surveillance, you were limited to the QVR Elite application, which had annual subscription licenses to any more than 2 cameras. I'm pleased to say that QVR Pro, the 8 camera license and 8 lifetime camera license I should add, software now runs with QVR Pro. So if you get a hold of this and you want to use it for surveillance, you can roll in 8 camera licenses and the surveillance software included in the price. And finally, carrying on the subject of QuTS, it's worth highlighting just exactly what elements of QuTS you can take advantage of on this, and the answer is pretty much all of them, barring one that we'll talk about later on. So if you want a NAS that takes advantage of write once, read many, encrypted drives, multi-factor authentication, ZFS expansions, and all of the performance benefits of ZFS like inline deduplication, inline compaction, and more, this is it. You've got it good to go. You can take advantage of all of those in the software that's included with this device, along with a myriad of applications and services that you can install via the web browser and a myriad of mobile applications as well. This isn't just a hardware purchase, it is a complete solution purchase. All that said, this is not a perfect NAS, and to maintain this profile, it certainly has had a few of its wings clipped, and those are the ones we're going to talk about while we go through the 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence a little bit longer. But do keep in mind that these aren't going to be hugely negative to everyone. These are just things, in some cases, that you should know before you purchase this device, and whether it's a good or a bad thing really might come down to you. Now, I don't want to be that guy, but this is like $1,000. I don't want to pay $1,000 for a 4-bay, 4-core, 8GB RAM NAS solution. I know it's a rack mount, and therefore rack mounts have the whole rack tax, but that money, there are other NASs out there that provide much bigger, bolder hardware than this for $1,000. Again, I mentioned it earlier, this is a complete hardware software solution, so you have to factor that in, and it's very unique in terms of its compaction and the scale of it alongside its unique scalability there on the back. But there's still no denying, we have to acknowledge that the price point for this is higher than a lot of us would have assumed for an EU class device. Next up, this is something for the Rackmount veterans. This device only having one PSU is going to put some users off. Again, when it comes to rack mounts, a lot of rack mount devices, I accept not a lot of 1U 4-bay rack mount devices, but definitely some arrive with 2 PSUs. This only has the one. It's a 150 watt internal PSU. Moreover than that, you can't remove it. It's not a removable PSU. So if you do have a power supply failure, you don't have a UPS in place, and you need to run this device very, very quickly, you're going to need to not only have a PSU on shelf, but it's going to be a custom internal sleeve one, not just a simple ejection rejection. And again, if it comes to sending one off for an RMA, you're going to have to manually take it out of there bit by bit, or you're going to have to send the whole unit, which is incredibly inconvenient. And that's the main reason why businesses who engage with rack mount solutions prefer removable PSUs, but also that they've got 2 PSUs. This next point concerns the memory. Number 1, it's not ECC memory. Now, I'm prepared to go a little easy because, at this scope, I'm not sure everyone would take advantage of ECC memory, but I will say, again, for $1,000, for a rack mount solution running on an Intel Atom processor, it doesn't have ECC memory. It's got on-die or on-band ECC, but not real, true ECC memory in there. Also, the CPU inside, it arrives with 8GB on the default configuration, and you can only scale it up to 16GB max according to QNAP's own product pages, even though that CPU supports up to 32GB of memory. So there is an artificial hobbling of the memory that you can scale up to on this device. And also, keep in mind that 8GB of memory means you can't quite use all of the features and services of QuTS I talked about earlier on. There are some things like inline data deduplication, which by default requires 16GB of memory. So this system arriving with 8GB, despite it being $1,000, I'm prepared to kind of go easy on the lack of ECC. But I think at this price point, and given how much of its marketing materials are around the features and facilities of QuTS, the ZFS file system version of QNAP software, which is fast becoming the de facto, I think 8 gig, meaning that I can't use all of the features out the gate, is super annoying. And also, why only 16? Stick another slot in. Give me another channel. One way or another, 16 gig of memory feels a weird limit. This next one might seem slightly counterintuitive to the compliments I gave them, but you see these E1S upgrade slots? Again, I actually quite like them, but I know they're not for everyone because these kind of slots also mean that getting upgrades is pretty inflexible and you're kind of limited in the most case to QNAP's own upgrade parts there, their own upgrade accessories there, locking you into an ecosystem a little bit too much. And I know there are users out there that would rather this system arrived with a single PCIe upgrade slot and 2 M.2 NVMe slots inside. I understand what they're going for here, and this is a very flexible device, but just keep in mind that these upgrades here are nowhere near as easy and over-the-counter purchasable as traditional PCIe upgrades. And lastly, returning back to QuTS, one of the things that has changed since this device first being revealed to us at Computex 2024 last year in May is that the QuTS software now is available on a lot more devices. What do I mean by that? Well, not just Rackmount, but desktop as well. Things like the 264, which is a 300 to 400 nicker QNAP NAS, now supports QuTS. The TS-264, the TS-253E, the 453E, the 664, all of these NASs powered by Intel Celeron processors, which arrive at around 300 to 350 nicker and cap out at about 700 at the 6-bay on desktop level, all support QuTS now, all support up to 16 gig of memory, all support PCI upgradability, all support M.2 NVMe. Mind you, the 53E series doesn't have that PCIe, it does have the M.2s. The point I'm making is that the main benefits that QuTS is offering on this solution that might make it very appealing to you, keep in mind there are cheaper QNAP devices available right now that have the same software, the same apps, a somewhat weaker CPU, and you have to keep that in mind, but still nonetheless, they are quad-core Intel processors with 4-thread and 9 lanes of PCIe to play with, not dissimilar, 8 lanes of PCIe, not dissimilar to that Intel Atom inside here. But there you go. What do you guys think? As I say, the full review of this device is still not complete. When it is, I'll link to it below, and if you're on NAS compared to a written review too. But ultimately, right now, this is still, for me, a very interesting device, and I'd like to see what QNAP are going to do to expand across this new, more flexible upgrade logic here that we're going to see across this device. But what do you guys think? Were you waiting for this device since summer last year, and you're happy or sad about it? Let me know in the comments below. There are links, of course, linking to several retailers below, but you can get a hold of one of these devices for yourself. So if you found this video helpful, and if you were going to go to those shops anyway, make sure those two things are true, because if that is the case, please use the links in the description, which will mean that me and Eddie, just us at NAS Compares, get a small commission and allows us to keep doing what we do. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.